Everybody, on to the second video here. What I've pulled up is the 4th page of Porter's article on what is strategy, and you should recognize this. This is the productivity frontier to which he refers. And if you notice, I want you to really know what essentially this means. If you look on the x-axis, you have relative cost position, and the y-axis, the non-price value non-price buyer value added. So the idea here is that the curve could be anywhere in here. It could be in here. It could be smaller in here. And the idea is that ultimately, at any given price, there's a certain amount of non-price value that you can deliver in an organization. And you want to make sure that you can deliver as much as possible. So here's the idea. Imagine that you were operating, you're a company and you're operating in here. So that would mean, of going on the x-axis here, that you have a relatively high cost position. Let's say that's Mercedes. And say you're only able to deliver about this much value. Look at the distance between this, where you are now, and what you might be able to deliver if at the state of best practices. So you're in here, so say you do a number of different things to help make your business, your Mercedes business, so to speak, or as a choice, more effective at delivering value. So say you take on just-in-time inventory, you do TQM, Six Sigma, you do benchmarking of other organizations like Acura, for example, Porsche, some of these high-end companies, and that pushes you upward so that the high cost that you incur, you can still deliver best practices or the most value added that is possible. And as you can see on here, imagine if you're a low-cost provider or a low relative cost, you're probably not going to be able to deliver that much value. The idea being that in order to provide value added, you have to pay money for it. You know, if Southwest wanted to deliver a really great meal experience on a plane, it would have to add costs, go into higher costs in order to improve its value delivered, say meals, the excitingness of a meal. So the essence of this is that Porter says for too long, organizations have focused on just state of best practice. And although it's helpful for, say, the industry, it doesn't provide any advantage for any one particular organization. So the idea is that a leader's or manager's job, particularly at senior levels, is to deliberate on how a company or organization can meet distinct needs, provide distinct activities, and specifically do something different that other organizations are not doing. So then he gives, as you know in this article, a number of different examples: IKEA, Vanguard, and in particular the one that I like the most is Southwest, because most of us, or many of us, have flown Southwest. And so to go down here, oops, wrong one, there we go. So as I think many of you know, Southwest is a low-cost provider. They have essentially, and by the way, Porter is also very well known in that book for introducing the there are sometimes people say 3, but it's 2 basic generic strategies to which he refers in this article, that organizations can either be low-cost providers and as a consequence provide less frills but charge a lower price to customers, or they can be, quote, differentiators. So that is cater to people who are not as price sensitive and provide more non-price value delivered. And so Southwest is a low-cost provider. They specifically are trying to meet the needs of, if you remember, families, students, and business travelers, and who are convenience-oriented and price-sensitive. And the idea is, if they couldn't fly cheaply and with convenience through Southwest, they might take the bus. They might drive themselves. They might take Amtrak. But instead, they take Southwest. because it's very convenient and it's relatively cheap. So the key is that although maybe some organizations like, say, Continental might look at Southwest and say, hey, let's just copy them, let's just go into that sphere, it's not that simple, because Southwest has perfected a set of interlocking, reinforcing, optimizing activities that allow it to deliver at a low-cost price, or be a low-cost provider. And so if you notice in these various activity mappings, there are a core set of, say, attributes in a little bit darker gray here. So, for example, very low ticket prices, limited passenger service, frequent reliable departures, lean, highly productive ground crews, and high aircraft utilization, all of which represent activities that allow them to lower their prices. For example, Southwest doesn't have baggage transfers, which would be add costs because you would have to hire people to transfer baggage between places, between flights. But remember, part of the reason they don't have baggage transfers is because they focus on short-haul flights, or what are called puddle jumper flights, between mid-size and smaller cities, and they're not as congested, which allows them to be more reliable in their departures. So that's key. So no baggage transfers it eliminates costs. They also don't have meals. Offering meals would cost money. Having limited use of travel agents. Using travel agents would cost money. So all these things, they limit passenger service, but it's the passenger service that costs money. So that's the way they are able to keep their prices low for their customers. You also have frequent, reliable departures. Now, part of the reason for that is because they have these highly productive ground crews who they pay well, but they also have flexible union contracts with. So people are paid well, which means they want to work really hard. The people are committed to having 15-minute gate turnarounds, and that means that they can get things ready to the aircraft ready to get back up into the air quickly. But without these highly productive ground crews, they wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. Also notice that there's a high level of employee stock ownership, which is motivating for the ground crews. And in general, they also have high aircraft utilization. The idea is, when you think about it, when an aircraft is on the ground, it's not able to carry people to make money in it. So they're able to turn over their assets. It's almost like at a restaurant, it would be the equivalent of a restaurant turning over tables very quickly, because they get people in, they get their money, and they get them out. So they are the low fare airline, as we see here on the bottom right, is their label. And they have been extremely thoughtful about how to position themselves as something unique. And by the way, there are entire case studies written about Southwest Airlines. So it's a very impressive model that they have. Okay. Now, what I'd like to point out is this idea of the generic strategies. Again, this is very important in terms of one of Porter's contributions. So, for example, here we have, as I said, there are two arguably, he's very well known for two generic strategies, but some people talk about three. And so the primary two are in yellow here, being a low-cost provider or being distinctive in product, and that is also called a differentiation strategy. So the advantage here is their strategic strength. Are they going to be low cost, or are they going to provide a lot of non-price value added and make their client products or services unique and add value? Now then there's the question of the scope of what an organization is offering. Is the organization offering a broad level of services and products to meet the broad needs of customers, or are they focusing more specifically on a certain type of market? Now, so the first one that I'll go to is Southwest. They have what's called a focus strategy. So to use the term, people use product differentiation, product cost, or a focus or niche strategy. Those are the big three. And by the way, you will see this, if you don't already, in the popular press all the time in terms of the verbiage used. So again, Southwest is not trying to meet the needs of every single airline passenger, only three particular segments: the families, business, travelers, and students, all of whom are trying to get somewhere quickly, and they don't want to pay a lot of money for it. So they are a low-cost provider, and they are a fairly narrow market. Walmart is also an example of a generic strategy, of a company with a low-cost generic strategy, but they are appealing to a lot of people's needs. As you well know, they have a large product selection in pretty much any household item that you can imagine, and we go to Walmart because we want to go there cheaply, or to buy cheaper, reasonably priced goods. Now, on the differentiation side, Apple. Apple has historically been a differentiator. And when you think about it, Apple products are not cheap. It's not that they're known for being cheap. The only product that they have that's arguably a little bit on the cheaper side would be the iPod Shuffle, which we'll get to a little bit later. But in general, they charge higher prices. They have a higher cost structure, but that enables them to provide really unique features, like the well-designed interfaces, the appealing look of the Apple products, etc. And so as one way that they have added costs is that they spend a lot of money on research and development. So higher costs that are incurred by the company, but the more value that they can provide that's non-price, and thus the more they can charge customers. Pixar is also an example of this. They try and meet a lot, they try to reach a broad audience of moviegoers, and specifically anyone who would want to go to see an animated film, and they do so through very capable animators. They have a unique competitive advantage in animation. Now, a differentiator that is focusing more narrowly would be, for example, a niche retailer or a holiday store. And let me give you an example. A holiday store could be high-end, so it's got some really interesting products, but they also are the organization's only focused on, say, one holiday. Say it's just Christmas, it's Hanukkah, it's so it's not everybody's going to celebrate every holiday. A niche retailer could be just a high-end furniture store. It could be a high-end clothing line, etc. So now, just to be sure, Porter is not without his critics. The main criticism of his work is that hybrid strategies employing low cost and differentiation approaches may yield better outcomes. And by that it means a lot of people have taken what Porter has said to mean you have to choose. You're either going to be a differentiator or a low-cost provider, and you don't want to get, quote, stuck in the middle. So you've got to choose to be one or the other. And my actual interpretation of Porter is that he's not saying that as much as he is, you've got to choose your activities. But people level the criticism at him and say, okay, so what are you saying? That you can't differentiate and actually have low costs, so you can't be high quality and low cost? So I think there may be a little bit of truth to that, but I would like to hear from him, for example, as to what he would say about it. And there are books that have come out identifying organizations that are able to provide a lot of non-price value and be low-cost providers at the same time. We'll go on to our next video.